You're listening to the Phillip Jordan Show, talking SEC football and beyond. Woo!
What's up, y'all? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show, talking SEC football and beyond. Of course, I'm your host, Phillip Jordan, from Last Word on College Football on 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama. We're having the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Woods Football. Thank you for checking out today's podcast. It's a really good one. Congratulations to Alabama Crimson Tide for doing all that, winning the national championship 52-24 over Ohio State on Monday night. What you can expect on today's podcast. In just a few moments, I'm going to give my thoughts on Alabama's victory over Ohio State. Then I'll be joined by Bill Bender from the Sporting News, where he is the National College Football writer, get his thoughts on the national championship. This is the 5th year in a row that the podcast after the national championship game, I will have Bill Bender on the show. So a lot of you, if you've been listening to me for a few years now, back when I was doing the Sideline Review podcast / radio show for ESPN Dothan, the Football Report, which I did like for a few months there, and of course this podcast. You know that Bill Bender comes on the show. I've had him on last few years to recap the national championship game, and he's back, and he will be doing so on this edition of the show. Before we do all that, let you guys know, find me and the podcast. You can find me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the podcast on Twitter. The handle is still the same, at Talking SEC Pod. And, of course, the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. Now, like I said, before I bring Bill Bender on, just my quick thoughts on the game, what I saw. And, of course, I had the great honor of getting to cover the national championship game this year for Last Word on College Football. It was a lot of fun doing that, writing about the game actually as it was going on. It was a lot of fun really being into the game in that way, a different way than you do just when you're watching it just as a fan. But coming into the game, I picked Alabama to win 45-38. So, obviously, I'm not shocked Alabama won. I picked them to win the game. But I guess I was surprised it was lopsided. I'll be honest with you on that one. And Ohio State offensively, to me, just never truly got in a rhythm. And I know Trey Sermon, they lost him for the game. Master Teague did really well at running back. So I don't think you can say, well, it's because Trey Sermon got hurt, so Ohio State lost. I don't really think that. I think they still were able to find success running the ball. I don't think Justin Fields was efficient in that game, but you can also say a little bit Alabama defense gave them issues there. But it was a close game early. It was a close game till about 5 minutes left there in the second quarter. When Ohio State kicked a field goal to go up, you're down 21-17. When that happened, I said it's over. Because Alabama probably going to take this down, because you really hadn't shown any signs of stopping Alabama. I mean, yeah, Mac Jones had fumbled the ball earlier, but other than that, you had really not stopped this Alabama offense. Nobody has all year. So I was thinking, Alabama's going to come down. It's going to be 28-17. But then it is 28-17. And you're looking at this, okay, it's big. Ohio State needs to score here. They need to get a touchdown. Make this thing 28-24 going into halftime. Yeah, Alabama's going to get the ball first coming out of the locker room. Figure something out at halftime, Ryan Day, to stop this offense. You might still have a chance. But then when they went 3 and out, Alabama gets the ball back again. Devontae Smith scores again. It's 35-17. Look, you never will say it's over, but I pretty much felt like going into halftime, this game was over. Unless Ohio State did something miraculous, because they had showed no signs of stopping Alabama at all in the first half. And the fact that you were telling me they were going to stop them 3 or 4 times and get back in the game, I just didn't see it happening. And so for me, the game shifted. It turned when Ohio State kicked the field goal instead of going for it. And it was 21-17, and then Alabama ran away with it. From there, Devontae Smith, unstoppable all year, deserving of the Heisman Trophy, and Mac Jones, what he did. And there was a point there in the second half that's really impressive to me, because Devontae Smith, of course, he got hurt, so he was out pretty much the whole second half. And Najee Harris was taking a break, basically, one possession there. Mac Jones still led the team down the field for a touchdown. Mac Jones, 5 touchdowns, 464 in the game. I mean, wow. I mean, there's just so much you with Mac Jones. 3-star guy, worked his tail off, was behind Jalen Hurts, was behind Tua. There was people saying, well, we want Bryce Young, not Mac Jones, to be the quarterback. Mac Jones, what he's done this year, just tremendous on his side of things. And then you had Najee Harris and all this and this team. I'm going to save my opinion this is where this team ranks because it's recent. So I'm going to hold off for me maybe a week or two, maybe next week here on the show. I will give more of my thoughts on that. But as we're coming here, I'm recording this on Wednesday. Podcast, of course, is dropping on Thursday morning. I'm going to save my thoughts on that going forward. And look, I mean, who's to say this Alabama team should be there next year, be in the talk and be in the conversation because they're going to have the talent. Nick Saban's still there. As long as Nick Saban's there, you can expect this team to be really, really good moving forward. But that's my thoughts on the national championship game. If you have your thoughts different than mine, you can hit me up on Twitter at PJordanSEC. And now I'm going to get my conversation going with Bill Bender where we get his thoughts and we talk about the game some more there. But I do want to throw a disclaimer out there. I recorded our conversation with my phone, not this glorious Blue Yeti microphone. So, especially on my end, the audio quality is going to probably drop a little bit here. It's still good, but it's just not as good as what you're getting right now. So, I just want to throw that warning out there for everybody. But anyways, here is my conversation with the Sporting News National College Football writer, Bill Bender.
Everybody joining me this week on the podcast is Bill Bender, Sporting News National College Football writer. And Bill, as always, I appreciate you taking out the time and coming on the show.
Hey, Phillip, thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing good. I guess, just starting off, I mean, it's kind of like, it feels like yesterday we were worried we were going to have a season. Now that the season is over, it's been a crazy year, obviously, college football, crazy year altogether, with everything going on. But college football getting through the season, just, as you look back on this season, just, what just sticks out to you overall?
I mean, we'll remember the good and the bad. It was obviously unlike any other season we've ever had, between cancellations, between wondering if we were even going to play. But it was fun. It was a good finish. One thing I've been asked a lot about recently is, what does the ratings drop mean? And I think that's a combination of a lot of things. So, I mean, we'll see where the sport goes from here, but it's definitely some challenges in moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're talking about this Alabama team from start to finish this year. Obviously they were the best team, close out the year, beating Ohio State in the national championship game 52-24. And obviously we're you always like to say, where does this team rank all time when one wins a championship? When you look at this year's Alabama team, just, what sticks out to you on that? Obviously we just saw the game on Monday night, but where does this team, for you, sit with the all-time teams?
I mean, it'll be in that conversation, just as the offense. When it's one of the most decorated teams of all time. All those guys, all those All-Americans, all those big-time players on the offense. I mean, you'll remember a team that looked unstoppable. And I tell people all the time, Ohio State's loaded with 4- and 5-star guys. And they were outmatched on that side of the ball. Granted, they were missing some guys, but you're going to remember this team as one of the great offenses. It's hard to prop them up against that LSU team from last year because LSU did the same thing, and I guess this is the new standard that to get a national championship team, you better have a 40-point offense just to get started.
Yeah, and looking at the game Monday night, and it was close early, 21-17, 5:21 left, but it felt like to me, and I was intrigued how you felt about the game as it was progressing. But Ohio State kicked that field goal. It kind of felt like, okay, the dam may be about to break, and then Alabama went out and scored. For you, when did it feel like it really just turned when Alabama just really took that next gear and just pulled the game away?
Yeah, that was definitely a turning point. But when Alabama was able to score before half, and then you're thinking, 42 in the first half, and that 35-17 lead, the way that Devontae Smith played, he was unstoppable. That was, like Saban said afterward, heavens knows how many yards he has if he doesn't hurt his finger. And it could have been 400. It really could have. And to think about that and not kind of shrug, just, he may have had 400 yards. It was a testament to that offense. And Najee Harris was running for tough yardage. Nick Jones was flawless. I mean, one of the things I was surprised at is Ohio State didn't get any pressure on him, and some of that may have been to do with not having those defensive linemen that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, you're talking about Devontae Smith, and that's something for me all year long. I think some people maybe not watch a lot of Alabama, maybe just see the scores or highlights and say, oh, well, he's just so good, he just gets open. But I think it's really interesting and really impressive how Steve Sarkisian this year did, just designing plays to get him open. And you saw that in the national championship game, too. They did different ways they figured out to get him open, because obviously the defenses are focusing on him, but just it's really, impressive, with Sark, how he did that this year. The designs and, making sure they find an opportunity to get him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a wonderful play calling exhibition by Steve Sarkisian all season. And, when I talked to Devontae Smith earlier in the year, he said it was the motions, the shifts, the moving around, the way that he did that creatively to create mismatches. And other teams did not have an answer for it all year. And when you have that kind of talent at receiver, which they didn't even have Jalen Waddle for most of the season, and he was not 100%. Well, I mean, he was lipping around during the game, and just a nightmare for defensive coordinators because you got to pick their battles.
Mm. Yeah, I was telling somebody that. I said this. You're right. I agree with you 100% on the unstoppable part, because you mentioned Najee Harris a little bit. It's like, okay, you want to play us in coverage, they can just turn around and hand it to Najee Harris 20 to 30 times and beat you that way too as well. I felt like all year Najee Harris. I think toward the end of the year, more people maybe noticed how good he was, but he was kind of like, sometimes it felt like the forgotten man, but he was a tremendous talent for them and then a tremendous asset for them all year as well.
Yeah, and a tough runner, and as he said afterward, it was not an easy game. Ohio State hit him, and he earned those tough yards, but a couple of those 4th and 1s early in the game were huge. And you mentioned the field goal. Alabama went for it on a couple 4th and 1s that really kind of changed the game in a lot of ways, because when they got in the red zone, they scored touchdowns. And I knew that was going to be the case in that game, and Najee Harris played a big role in that. And I mean, even when Ohio State would stop him, it looked like at the line of scrimmage, he would gut out, turn a 2-yard run into a 7-yard run, and that adds up over the course of the game.
Yeah, there's a couple of hits he took in that game Monday night. I was like, how is he even getting up from that? How is he not? It looked like the defender was the one that was taking the blow, not Najee on that. And then, of course, Mac Jones. I mean, how often are you going to see a quarterback goes 36 for 45, 464, 5 touchdowns and not win the MVP award? And for Mac, what stands out to you with him? And, of course, Alabama, coming off the last 2 years for us, of course, he had Tua there. And the numbers he put up, a generation, different kind of talent, tremendous talent. We know, you expect him to be good in the pros, down the road. But with Mac, what do you see with him, what he operates with the offense?
Yeah, I just think the poise, the good decision-making, the things that he does there that make it possible for them to put up the yardage. I mean, he doesn't have the splash value that Tua does, but, the offense was every bit as good, and that was a striking thing. When you're that good on offense and that efficient and that the way he didn't make mistakes. He made a mistake early in that game on the fumble when he turned the wrong way or he turned right into a blitz and didn't see it coming. And then after that, they responded. Like they said on the telecast, he was telling everybody, well, that's on me. Let's go down and score. And it's exactly what he did. So I think it's just his composure and his the way he led that offense was pretty phenomenal throughout the year.
You're watching him play. How do you see him, at the next level? Where do you see him at with that?
That's a big mystery because somebody's going to go in on him. And, with Alabama quarterbacks, sometimes it's hard. I'm not discounting anything he did, but we all know how loaded guys are around him. And but to his credit, he played above that. I think he profiles similar to Tua in some ways, that he's a good decision maker. He makes the right throws. Probably throws a little bit better deep ball than Tua does, if that's possible. And he's shown that throughout his career. So he's definitely one of those curious prospects at the combine, and we'll see how it goes. But he's certainly somebody that could definitely have some first-round appeal. It depends on the franchise willing to take a chance on him.
I just got to say this about him. He needs, when he does run, he needs to learn how to slide a little bit better. That's one thing he needs to work on, because sometimes when he runs, obviously he don't do it often. It looks a little awkward at sometimes. But, other than that, I'll be on that with him. Very, very impressive what he's been able to do this year. So you look at this Alabama team, and, of course, this is the sixth title with Saban, his seventh overall. He passes Bear Bryant. And, the Bear Bryant, Nick Saban discussion, I know is there, now that he's passed them as well. But when you look at this Alabama team, do you think this was his best team at Alabama?
I think it's his team that went through the most. Like you said afterward, 11 SEC games, dealing with COVID throughout the season, dealing with the injuries that they had. It may have been his most enjoyable team for him personally, too. And he talked about that at length. So, yeah, I mean, this is a really good squad, a really good group of players, and I would say it's hard to say because his early teams were so predicated on – it's his best offensive team, there's no doubt about that. But a couple of those teams he had early in his dynasty, the ones that were ground and pound and ridiculous defense, if they matched up, I mean, it'd be a hell of a game, honestly. It'd be a really good game watching those two teams go at it.
Yeah, it would be. And I know, I guess one thing to look at it, well, how would they match up if you get Julio? Because, of course, this Alabama defense at times, got beat down. Which, defense is different now than it was back then in the earlier years for Saban. But it would be interesting seeing Julio Jones go up against this Alabama defense now.
Well, he'd have to match him up on Surtain. So he was he was a big difference maker in this game, too, because Ohio State has really good receivers. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson were awesome throughout the season. I know Wilson made a few plays late. I think he's going to be one of those guys that steps up into All-American status next year. And but Surtain makes a difference because he takes away one of those guys. And I know the other talk has been going on, well, what if LSU last year played Alabama this year? Well, they'd probably played a 50 like they did in the game of the century last year. And it'd be fun to see, and Joe Burrow and Mac Jones making those good decisions. So it's all fun argument material, but I definitely think that this team established itself as one of the greatest teams of all time under, obviously, the pandemic of the century. Yeah. So I know it's going to be a lot of people going to be talking about it throughout here in the off season, stuff like that, especially the Alabama LSU fans. I mean, it's already a big rivalry as it is between the two programs, and especially the fan bases. So it gives me a little more to argue about. I guess I wanted, before, I'll let you go, is to kind of transition for 2021, this upcoming next season. It's like, okay, as soon as the season ends, we're always looking forward to when the next season starts, who's going to be contenders. I mean, Alabama's going to lose, Mac Jones. You're going to lose Najee Harris. You're going to lose Devontae. Just lose players like they do everywhere. They always replace. Just, kind of keeping in the SEC first, who do you see potentially as maybe Alabama's biggest challenger next year in the conference? Yeah, I mean, they'll have it from every place. I mean, Georgia will be really good. Georgia opens with Clemson. That's a heck of an opener there, too. It doesn't get much bigger than that in Charlotte as far as the first big piece of the college football playoff puzzle next year. There's some other good games out there. But I think it'll be a combination of teams. Obviously, Georgia, A&M, they're building something there with Jimbo Fisher. I think LSU's in for a bounce-back season. And then you got to look at Florida and Auburn. It's still the same grinder. It's going to be tough. But how many schools? I think I just listed like 6 schools that we'll have ranked, and 5 of those teams will be in the top 15. It's never easy in the SEC.
Yeah, I guess that adds to the impressiveness of what Alabama did this year. I mean, I guess at that as well, going through the conference 11-0. I mean, I think a lot of people thought coming into the season that the conference was going to cannibalize itself, and Alabama just run through it 11-0 against that schedule.
Yep, and next year, I mean, obviously that's going to be a talk into future seasons. Will they increase the number of games? How will that affect non-con scheduling, those kind of things? And I think, you can spend all this time from now not only looking ahead to the season, but looking ahead to how we can make that season a little more smooth for everybody. It was obviously a chore to get through this year, and hopefully the vaccine works and numbers go down and we get to some sense of normalcy in this country as well. And I think if all those things happen, it's going to be a fun season next year. I'm already looking forward to it. It took me a day or two to recover, and then I'm already looking at next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, one more thing with next year, and then I'll let you go and wrap it up. But you expect, every year it feels like now we expect Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State to be, the three ones we talk about the most. Who are some teams nationally you think next year? I know a lot of people are high on Oklahoma going next year. You mentioned Georgia. Who are some teams you're looking for next year, to kind of jump into that party?
Well, Oklahoma and Georgia kind of stick out as they'll be in the top 5 probably. Oklahoma with that offense around Spencer Rattler, Marvin Mims, solid running game. Lincoln Riley, they got the win against Florida, and they can build off that. I think Iowa State's a team that's very interesting because all their guys came back. Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Charlie Kohler, and Matt Campbell's built a special culture there. I think they're the one team that could break through in the playoff party, and we'll see if that happens. But those are the ones that I'm really looking at that become very interesting going into next season.
Like you said, and I'm with you too. The season ended, and I'm like, okay, let's see what's going to happen next year. I'm already looking forward to it, especially when you got Georgia and Clemson, as you mentioned, on that opening weekend. A lot of eyeballs will be on that one. That's the championship level football game with those two. So it's going to be a lot of fun waiting to the season to get here. And Bill, it's also always fun when you come on the show to talk all things college football, and I always appreciate the time. And if listeners want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm at Bill Bender 92 on Facebook. I know we tried to connect earlier there, and I forget what come up that day that made it really busy, but it's good to reconnect with you and get on this podcast, and we'll have to hit it a couple times over the off season, no doubt about it. Oh,
absolutely. We'd love to have you on again, and hope we can do that. And once again, thanks, Bill, and look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Bill.
All right, and once again, thanks to Bill Bender for coming on this edition of the podcast. You guys will notice this is a much shorter edition of the show that you have gotten the last couple of weeks, but as always, I do appreciate you checking out this show and making it part of your day. And please, you know what helps the podcast get seen and noticed, and more people know about it if you share. If you go on your social media, if you see this thing tweeted out or put it on Facebook, share it. Let people know. I really would appreciate. And look, if I post this and I see that you shared it or retweeted it, I'll give you a shout out here on the podcast. So please do that. Really would appreciate that. And of course, the podcast says Beyond. So what does that mean going forward here? The artwork is pretty much the same. I had made one with my name on the front, but I kind of went back just to the Talking SEC podcast artwork. Tried to get a little bit something slightly altered on that, maybe in the next week or so. But the Beyond is because, look, I love this conference. I love the SEC. I've been doing this podcast, Talking SEC, for 2 years. Sideline Review was mostly SEC stuff. Mostly everything I did is like 90% SEC stuff. But I wanted to go with just the Phillip Jordan show, Talking SEC football and beyond, because there are times where I kind of want to jump out, talk about other stuff, because I'm just a sports fan. So I like talking different people about different things. And like I said a few weeks ago, you might hear me talk a little Troy from time to time, Florida State, people who just have played college or pro ball or other stuff. The occasional NFL guest to talk about some stuff, especially here in the off season, as we're just doing, especially, like I said, in that kind of cutting my own self off there. But with the off season, kind of talk other stuff, just kind of, do the show every week. Look, SEC is always going to be the 85 to 90% focus here, but I do like talking about other things. So that's why I added in the Beyond part, put my name on the front of the show. But I do want everybody that listens to this to know this. The key parts of the show are the same. I'm not changing that. There's nothing drastic. I just, from time to time, want to talk to different people about different things. So the Phillip Jordan show is what that's about. And last week on the show, I had Brian Jones. We talked about Georgia. We had a heavy conversation with Georgia, but also we did some NFL picks. I went 3-3 on my picks last week because I had picked Seattle to beat the Rams. I had picked the Titans to beat the Ravens, and I had also picked the Steelers to beat the Browns. So I did get those wrong. So we have 4 games this week, and just do this real quickly. Like I said, this is a much shorter podcast than I usually do. I am going to go with, I think the Packers will beat the Rams. I just don't think the Rams can score enough points there. I'm going Bills beating the Ravens. I think that's going to be a really good game, though. Really good game, but I'll take the Bills in a close one there. The Chiefs are going to beat the Browns. I think the Browns just put so much energy to win that one playoff game. I don't know if they're going to quite get to that level that they did against the Steelers again. I just think the Saints are better than the Buccaneers. That's what I've seen when they played this year. I think Brady is a better quarterback than Breeze right now, and he's always been better than Breeze, I would say. But I'm going to go with the Saints here, and I wonder what happens with Tampa Bay if they don't pull it off and win a Super Bowl, get a Super Bowl. Does Bruce Arians get fired, or does some kind of big change happen there with Tampa? But just real quickly, I want to give y'all my NFL picks and some teams to look out for next year in college football. I mean, you heard Bill Bender mention them. I'm right there with them too as well. I would, agree with Georgia. I think Georgia, they are the biggest threat to Alabama. I don't sit sold on A&M going in next year. I'll just be honest with you there. Florida, I think, is going to take a step back just because they're losing so many good players, and they're not like Alabama or even Georgia where it's plug and replace. I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there for some of them players. I do think LSU bounces back. Not necessarily an SEC title contender. I do think they're flirting with a 9-win season there. Auburn's going to be interesting. I think it is a little bit more of a rebuild than maybe some people thought going into the Brian Harsin hire. I do like this staff he's putting together. He's really gone out and it's got a blend of the Boise assistants with some SEC people as well. So I think that's very interesting and smart way to go about things. People you're familiar with, but also people that are familiar with the Southeast Conference. Very important. ACC is Clemson, of course, but I think North Carolina, if they can get some better defense there, somehow their quarterback, I like what they can be. Ohio State, to me, is the only team out of the Big Ten I can see contending for a college football playoff position. Oklahoma in the Big 12, Iowa State too as well. Look out for them with all the players they got coming back. Pac-12, there to get a team in. I like USC. I'm just going to sit with USC on that one with Keaton Slovis coming back next year as well. So that's kind of, just all around about look at who it could be the national title contenders for next year. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. We'll be back next week with another podcast, brand new episode. Got some ideas I'm going to ask on, but I'm not going to say it here because nobody's confirmed. So just keep an eye out for the podcast and see what's going to be going on next week here on the show. Once again, thanks to Bill Bender for being on the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast this past year. Really appreciate it. Just because it's called the Phillip Jordan Show does not mean it's going to drastically be different. Talking SEC football is the main focus here. We had a mixture of other stuff. Let's just say that. But I love your feedback. I would love to hear your feedback on what I should do and maybe some potential guests, reasonable guests. Don't be putting their fine bomb or people like that. We got to be reasonable on what this little podcast of mine really is. But we'll do that. We'll do that going forward. So I do appreciate you guys, shoot me that feedback. Anyways, remember you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Of course, Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast has a Twitter account. Did not change that handle at Talking SEC Pod. And lastly, I will say this as we close out the show. Kevin Steele is going to the Tennessee Volunteers. So Jeremy Pruitt, I'll watch my back if I was you.
Thank you for listening to this week's Phillip Jordan Show. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great football talk, where we are talking SEC football and beyond.